Hello, coming up on today's podcast, I want to talk a little bit about the safety position. Yesterday, I was out with a couple of friends having some breakfast, right? And one of my boys' name is Rodney. He played safety growing up as a kid in Pop Warner. He played in high school and even played a little bit in college. He never turned pro, of course, but safety was always the position he loved to play. We got to talking football like we always do, and he said something that kind of stuck with me. He said, Stacy, I go on a lot of different football podcasts. I noticed that everybody is always talking about quarterbacks, wide receivers, edge rushers, and coaches, but nobody ever talks about the safety position. And you know what? The more I thought about it, the more I realized he do have a point. So today, I'm going to change that. We're going to talk about why the safety position is one of the most important positions in football, what separates good safeties from the all-time greats, why players like Ronnie Lott, Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu, and Brian Dawkins changed the game forever, and why I'm so optimistic about Chris O'Leary taking over this Chargers defense, and also why I believe Derwin James is building a resume that deserves to be mentioned among the elite safeties in all of football. And it's all happening right now. I'm Stacy. It's Charles Talk 4630. Let's get started. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Chargers Talk 4630. I'm your host, Stacy. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe this podcast, and also check out slmexpressions.com for Chargers content you won't find anywhere else. Now, before I get started, I want to let you know something that I'm about to try that's new, that I've never done before. Like every Friday, I'm going to be going live right here on Chargers Talk 4630 for about 30 minutes just to talk Chargers football, answer some questions, hear some things that you got to say. I always want to be engaged with you guys, and now I want to be engaged with you doing a live show. A lot of times guys have a whole lot to say. Sometimes guys ask a lot of questions, and I don't want to ignore anybody because I answer all the questions that I can, and if I can. And I want to engage with you guys live. I want to get more of communicating with you guys back and forth. And if you look down on your screen in the corner, you do see where it says Chargers Talk 4630. You see the hotline number is 848-208-6743. And I want to know if you would be willing to participate on Fridays. I'm going to come on maybe like 9 in the morning. I'm going to do like a half hour live so that we can just be a little more personable with you guys. You don't even have to ask any questions. All you have to do is call in and give your comments. Call in, tell me what would you be looking for in this camp that's coming up soon. What you expect from the Chargers this season. How far do you think they'll go? Do you think they'll go deep in the playoffs? Do you think they'll go to the Super Bowl? Or do you think everyone is overhyping the Chargers this season? And I want to know. I want to engage back and forth with you. So I want you guys after the podcast's over or while the podcast is going on to put in the comment section and say, hey, you're down. You're down to give a call. And we're going to try it out and see how it works out. And if it does, we'll go into the season doing it after every game. We'll be doing a live after every game so we can engage with each other while emotions are still raw, right? It's something exciting about a great victory and you being able to come on and talk live about it. And then a devastating loss. People want to come and get it off your chest, and I want to give you that opportunity to do that. So if you got a topic that you want me to cover, you got questions for me, or you just want to talk football or get something off your chest, call the Chargers hotline number. It's right there on the screen. It's 848-208-6743. It's 848-208-6743. We're going to start that on Friday mornings. Now, once the regular season gets here, the schedule is going to change a little bit. Instead of Fridays, I'll be going on a live after Chargers game so we can break everything down together while it's still fresh, right? So make sure you save that number, and I hope to hear from all of you, a lot of you, very soon. Now, let's get into this Chargers podcast, and man, do we have a good one today. You know, it's funny how one simple conversation can completely change the direction of a podcast, right? Like I was mentioning earlier, I was having breakfast yesterday with a couple of friends, and we were talking football like we always do. Before long, we started talking about the Chargers, the AFC, coaching changes, training camp coming up, just football in general, right? And then my friend brought something up that made me stop and think. Now, remember, this wasn't just any football fan. This was a guy that played safety throughout his childhood. He played in Pop Warner. He played in high school. He even played a little bit in college. Safety was his position, and it's still the position he pays the closest attention to whenever he watches football. So he looked at me and said, Stacy, you know, I watch guys spend all this time on quarterbacks and wide receivers and running backs and edge rushers and coaches, but hardly anybody ever talk about the safety position. And why do you think that is? And I kind of laughed at it at first, but then I start thinking about it. You know what? He's right. Even with me. Every once in a while, I know I do mention Derwin James or talk about a safety making a big play, but I've never really sat down and dedicated our podcast to talking about the importance of the safety position. I get it because when you really understand football, you understand that a great safety can completely change a defense, right? Matter of fact, I would go a step further. Some of the greatest defenses in the NFL has had elite safeties. Think about that for a second. When you think about the old 49ers defenses, who comes to mind? Ronnie Lott, right? When you think about those dominant Ravens defenses from a safety perspective, you think about Ed Reed. When you think about the Steelers, you think about Troy Polamalu flying around with all that hair, right? And then with the Eagles, you think about Brian Dawkins. Now, those weren't just really good football players. Those were players that changed the way offenses had to attack a defense. And quarterbacks had to know where they were going to be before the snap. Offensive coordinators had to count for them before calling the play, right? And that tells you how valuable the position really is. Now, here's the thing. Most fans notice a safety when he gets an interception or when he comes flying downhill and lays somebody out. But those are the plays that make the highlights. But that's not really what makes a great safety. The plays that make a great safety usually happen before the football is even snapped. The communication, recognizing formations, it's understanding route combinations, and it's knowing where your help is, right? It's making sure everybody else is lined up correctly. It's disguising coverage so quarterbacks think he's getting one look when he's actually really seeing something different. Those little things, they don't make SportsCenter. They don't go viral, but defensive coordinators, they love that shit, you know? And that brings me to something Chris O'Leary said recently that stood out to me. You guys already know, before becoming the Chargers defense coordinator, Chris O'Leary coached his secondary. That's his background, right? That's where he made his name. When he was asked what he looks for in a safety, he talked about instincts and communication. I'm going to play that clip for you because I think it tells you everything you need to know about what this coaching staff values. Listen to this soundbite.
I think there's a few things at safety that you can't really teach. One's the ability to close in space. Like, you either have great feet and you're able to track and all those things. You can get better in that area, but that's something you got. And then the second thing is QB anticipation. Like, there's a feel and a nuance to looking at the quarterback, feeling routes, and knowing where the ball's about to go.
Now, after hearing that, doesn't that make perfect sense? Everything he talked about comes back to instincts, right? You know, we throw the word around all the time with football. He has great instincts. But what does that really mean? To me, instincts mean you see something before everybody else sees it, right? You're not reacting, but you're anticipating. You're not chasing the football. You're arriving where it's already going. That's the difference. Now, speaking from a law enforcement perspective, right? If you're a detective and you're assigned to a case where you want to get there as soon as possible, there's three major things that you need to establish when you arrive there, right? Those are evidence contamination, vanishing leads, and altered circumstances. You just can't be late to the crime scene, right? If you're a safety and you're reacting after the receiver is already running wide open, usually that means you're too late. If you're getting over to help after the ball is already in the air, you're too late. The crime has already happened, right? Usually great safety solve the problem before it becomes a problem. That's why having bad safeties is like driving a car with bad brakes, right? You might have all the horsepower in the world. You might have an unbelievable crazy engine. But if those brakes don't work when you need them, eventually you're going to crash, right? Football is no different to me. You can have great corners. You can have great linebackers. You can have an outstanding pass rush. But if the back end of your defense don't communicate, don't recognize what's coming, don't take proper angles, don't understand leverage, eventually somebody going to score 6 points on you. And we've seen it happen all the time. Now, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about when I say you can't be late to the crime scene. Last season, I was watching a game with the Jets and the Bengals, and T. Higgins got loose on a go route, and he took it about 50 or 60 yards down the sideline for a touchdown, right? The Jets had a rookie corner on him. I think his name was Azariah Thomas. When I first watched that play, I said, man, why would they leave a rookie corner one-on-one with T. Higgins? That didn't make sense to me. Then later on, I found out what really happened. The safety was late getting over the top. I believe it was the rookie corner who was expecting some help, and the help never got there. Now, all of a sudden, what looked like bad corner play really wasn't all on the corner. The safety got there late. That's why I keep saying you can't be late to the crime scene. That's the difference between giving up a 15-yard completion and giving up 6 points. And here's the thing. People always want to talk about 40 times, right? This guy runs a 4.4 and this guy runs a 4.3. Listen, I've seen plenty of guys come into the league 6'2", 195 pounds, running a 4.40. But if you don't know what you're looking at, if you don't recognize route combinations, if you don't understand leverage, if you don't understand anticipation, if you don't understand what's about to happen, that 4.4 speed don't mean anything, right? Matter of fact, a guy that runs a 4.4 but is always out of position, he looks more like he's running a 4.8 because he's always chasing somebody instead of beating them to the spot. Being late to the crime scene. The detective gonna lose his job if he's always getting to the crime scene too late. Football is not always about who's the fastest. Sometimes it's about who sees it first. That's why I think instincts is every bit as important as athletic ability when you're talking about the safety position. Now, don't get me wrong. You still want to be athletic. You still want to be able to run fast, right? You still want to be physical. You still got to tackle and cover, right? But if you got all the athletic ability in the world and your football IQ is just not there, you're going to struggle. The great ones all had something in common. They saw the game before everybody else did. They recognized formations. They studied tendencies. They knew what offenses was trying to do before the ball was even snapped. All the great safeties played the position a little different though, right? Every one of them had different strengths, but every single one of them had great instincts. They were always around the football. They were always making game-changing plays. And the crazy thing is, a lot of those guys was not the fastest players on the field. They just was the smartest. They trusted what they saw. They reacted without hesitation. And when you play safety, hesitation gets you beat. That's why I always say the safety is the quarterback of the secondary. The middle linebacker is looking at the offense from the front. The safety is looking at everything from the back. He's seeing the whole picture. He's making sure everybody's lined up. He's communicating adjustments. He's making checks before the snap, right? He's making life easier for everybody else around him. But when you got a great safety back there, the entire defense just plays faster. Now let's talk about some of the guys that made me fall in love with the safety position because I had the privilege of watching some of the greatest to ever put on a helmet. The first guy I want to start with is Ronnie Lott. Now, if you're younger, you probably hear people throwing his name around a whole lot. But unless you actually watch Ronnie Lott play, it's hard to explain just how dominant he really was. When I was growing up, Ronnie Lott was like the guy everybody wanted to be like. What made Ronnie Lott so special wasn't just that he could hit. Everybody talks about the big hits, and believe me, he could separate a receiver from a football in a heartbeat. But here's what made him different. He could do everything. He started his career at cornerback. He played at an all-pro level. Then they moved him to safety. He became an all-pro there too. How many guys can honestly say they've been one of the best players in the league at two different positions? Not many. But that's why I always tell people don't just remember Ronnie Lott because of his highlights. Remember him because of how complete of a football player he was. He finished his career with 63 interceptions. He went to 10 Pro Bowls. He won 4 Super Bowls, all with the 49ers. He ended up right where we all thought he would be, in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Then let's talk about Ed Reed. Ed Reed was a total different player. Ronnie Lott would intimidate you with his physicality, but Ed Reed would intimidate you with his mind. I still don't know if I've ever seen a safety read quarterbacks the way Ed Reed did. It was almost like he knew where the football was going before the quarterback even threw it. Quarterbacks would think they had somebody open, and all of a sudden, here comes Ed Reed out of nowhere. Interception. That's why people call him one of the greatest ball hawks in NFL history. 64 career interceptions. And it wasn't just the interceptions, right? It was what happened after the interception. Once he got his hands on the football, he became a returner. Every interception had a chance to turn into 6 points. He wasn't catching the football just to go down. He was trying to put the game away. That's what made him so dangerous. Then you got Troy Polamalu. Man, Troy might have been one of the most instinctive football players I've ever seen. There were times I watch him play and say, there's no way he's supposed to be there. But somehow he was. He shoot through the A-gap before the running back even got the football. He timed the snap count so perfectly, by the time the quarterback caught the snap, Troy was already in the backfield. How many times did we see him leap over the line of scrimmage? You just can't teach instincts like that. That reminded me of Junior Seau. It really did. Junior used to do the same thing. Sometimes he sees something, he trusts what he saw, and he go make a play that wasn't even drawn up, right? Now, I'm not saying every player should be freelancing out there. No, I'm not. What I'm saying is, when you got special football instincts, sometimes you earn the freedom to trust what you see. Troy Polamalu had that gift. He was a 2-time Super Bowl champion. He was a defensive player of the year, and one of the biggest reasons those Steelers defense was so feared back then. Then you got Brian Dawkins. Brian Dawkins was the heartbeat of the Eagles defense. Forget the statistics for a minute. Just watch him before the game started. Remember how he come running out of that tunnel? I sit there and I'd be laughing because he would come out on all fours like he was getting ready to hunt somebody. His energy was contagious. It was. His teammates fed off of it. The crowd fed off of it. And he wasn't just playing football. He was setting the tone. And once the game started, you better know where number 20 was. Seriously. Because if you came across the middle not paying attention, Brian Dawkins was going to remind you real quick that he was one of the hardest hitters of his era. But he was smart. That's something that people overlooked. The great ones weren't just violent. They were disciplined. They knew when to attack. They knew when to stay deep. They knew when to bait a quarterback into making a mistake, right? That's football intelligence. That's football IQ. And that's why all four of these guys are remembered as some of the greatest safeties to ever play the game. Now, those are the names usually everybody brings up when they're talking about the greatest safeties, right? And rightfully so. Those guys earn every bit of the respect they get. But there are a few other safeties I don't get to talk about nearly enough. One of them is Paul Krause. Now, if I ask most football fans today who holds the NFL record for interceptions, a lot of people will probably assume Ed Reed. Some might even say Ronnie Lott, but it's Paul Krause. Paul Krause had 81 interceptions. Think about that for a second. 81 interceptions. That's a record that still stands right now. And he never gets mentioned. He played for the Washington Redskins, and I think early in his career, he played for the Minnesota Vikings. He went to 8 Pro Bowls, and somehow I still don't think his name gets mentioned enough when people start talking about one of the greatest safeties in the game. Then you got Ken Houston. He played for the Houston Oilers and the Washington Redskins. Man, listen, Ken Houston could flat out play. He could tackle, he could cover. He had 49 career interceptions. He's another guy I think deserves a whole lot more respect than what he gets. Then you got Larry Wilson. Now, if you've been watching football for a long time, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Larry Wilson changed the way people looked at the safety blitz. Back then, safeties was not doing some of the things they do today. But Larry Wilson was. He come flying off the edge. He'll blow up running plays. He'll get after quarterbacks. And offense coordinators had to account for him every single snap. He was way ahead of his time. Then Steve Atwater. Now, Steve Atwater is one of those guys that made receivers think twice before coming across the middle. And he wasn't just a big hitter. He was an intimidator. And back in those days, you knew if you caught the football in his area, you were probably going to pay for it, right? He helped set the tone for those Denver Broncos defenses, and he did it for a long time. And then there's Sean Taylor. Look here, man. Let me tell you. Every time I talk about Sean Taylor, I always wonder what could have been because, unfortunately, his life was taken way too short. We'll never know just how good he could have become. But I think most football fans would agree on one thing. His trajectory was pointing towards greatness. He had everything. He had the size. He had the speed. He had the instincts. He had the range. He had the physicality. He had all of it. And I'll never forget watching him play against the Chargers. I think it was 2005. We was at RFK Stadium in Washington, D.C. Antonio Gates was in his prime. Sean Taylor was covering him. Gates had 3 catches for 39 yards. Sean Taylor was sticking to him like crazy glue. I'd never seen a safety that was able to take Gates away the way Sean Taylor did until that game. And let me tell you, watching it in person at the game live was mind-blowing. Sean Taylor was dishing out punishment throughout the game. And this is when I knew he was legit. As punishing as a fullback Lorenzo Neal was, Drew Brees hands the ball off to LaDainian Tomlinson with Lorenzo Neal leading the way, and Sean Taylor blew Lorenzo up, knocked him backwards, and caused LaDainian Tomlinson to fumble all on one play. At that time, I knew this guy was everything they said he was. He was an unstoppable force. And I realized at that time I was watching greatness. We're talking about one of the greatest tight ends to ever play the game in Antonio Gates. And he was locked down the entire game by Sean Taylor. I was mad as hell, but I recognized how good this man really was. And I'm sitting there watching that game like, man, this dude is different. That was one of the first times I ever seen a safety consistently match up with Antonio Gates like that. The Chargers came back and won it in overtime after LaDainian Tomlinson broke that long touchdown run, stiff-arming Ryan Clark right into the earth. But even after the Chargers won, I walked away happy and just playing in my head over and over that long touchdown run to seal the game by LT. But I was also thinking about watching Sean Taylor making impactful plays all day. That's how much he stood out. That's what great players do. They leave an impression on you. And sometimes greatness is not measured by how many years you play, right? Sometimes greatness is measured by the impact you made while you was out there. All these guys just had crazy football instincts. They saw the game differently than everybody else. And that's just something you can't teach. Now let's bring this conversation back to the Chargers because after talking about all those great safeties, you start to understand why I don't agree with people that think the Chargers defense is automatically going to take a step backwards just because Jesse Minter is no longer here. Now listen, losing Jesse Minter is a big deal, right? I'm not trying to minimize what he accomplished because he did a great job with this defense when he was here. He helped change the culture. He put players in positions to succeed. He got everybody buying into one vision, right? There's no question about that. But here's the thing. Chris O'Leary didn't just walk in off the street. He didn't just get hired because somebody liked him. He earned this opportunity. He comes from the same coaching tree. He worked side by side with Jesse Minter. He coached this secondary. He coached these safeties. He already knows these players. More importantly, those players already know him. And that matters, right? Continuity and trust matters. Relationship matters. Now, I don't have a crystal ball. None of us do. None of us know exactly how Chris O'Leary is going to perform as a defensive coordinator. Anybody that tells you they know exactly what's going to happen, they guessing. But here's what I do know. You can judge a coach by what he's already shown you. Before Chris O'Leary came to the Chargers, he became the defensive coordinator at Western Michigan, right? When he got there, that defense was one of the worst defenses in college football. They were giving up over 400 yards a game. They were giving up over 30 points a game. They were ranked near the bottom, I think. Yes, they were ranked near the bottom nationally. One season later, under Chris O'Leary, that defense looked completely different. They cut their scoring defense all the way down to 17 points a game. They jumped into the top 10 in scoring defense. Their total defense just improved. They were giving up over 30 points a game. They were ranked near the bottom nationally, right? One season later, under Chris O'Leary, the defense looked completely different. They cut their scoring defense all the way down to 17 points a game. They jumped into the top 10 in scoring defense. Their total defense improved. Their pass rush got 43 sacks. Quarterbacks had a much harder time throwing the football against them. That's not luck. That's not coaching. That's development. That's teaching. That's getting players to understand what you're asking them to do and being able to go out there and execute it, right? So when people ask me why am I optimistic about Chris O'Leary, that's why. I'm not making my own opinion up out of this, right? I'm looking at what he's already accomplished. Then I look at what he did with the Chargers secondary. I watched Derwin James have one of the best seasons of his career. I watched Elijah Molden come in and play great football before his knee injury. Tony Jefferson came in and gave this defense veteran leadership. R.J. Mickens showed flashes every time he got opportunities, right? Those guys were communicating. They were flying around. They trusted each other. And that's exactly what you want to see from the back end of a defense, right? Because a safety's job is bigger than just making tackles. He's orchestrating everybody in front of him, right? He's making sure everybody is on the same page. He's influencing everything from the back end forward. That's why so many great defensive coaches started out coaching defensive backs. Because if you can understand the secondary, you usually understand the entire defense. Everything works together. The pass rush, the linebackers, the corners, the safeties. One mistake by one player can break down the whole thing, right? One great safety can make everybody around him better. So yes, Rodney, you're right, my friend. We should not sleep on the safety position. It's one of the most important positions in all of football. Maybe the most underrated position in football. And when you get one that's truly special, he changes everything. And I said all those things to say this. It all leads me back to Derwin James. You know, after sitting here talking about Ronnie Lott, Ed Reed, Troy Polamalu, Brian Dawkins, where does Derwin James fit into that conversation? Now listen, I'm not sitting here telling you Derwin James has had a better career than all those Hall of Famers, right? I'm not saying that at all. Those guys earned every bit of their place in football history. What I am saying is this. When you start talking about complete safeties, when you start talking about guys that can literally do everything you ask them to do, Derwin James belongs in that conversation. Think about everything we talked about during this podcast. A safety has to tackle, Derwin does that. A safety has to cover tight ends, Derwin does that. Cover running backs, Derwin does that. A safety has to play deep, Derwin does that. A safety has to come down in the box and stop the run. Derwin checks that box. A safety has to blitz. Are you kidding me? Done. Derwin might be one of the best blitzing safeties I've ever watched. How many times have we seen him come screaming off the edge and blast a quarterback from his blind side? How many times have we seen him line up over a guard, walk around before the snap, show one thing, then come on a delayed blitz and completely wreck the play? That's special. We've seen him play on the first level, the second level. We've seen him play on the third level. We've seen him line up all over the football field. And that's what makes Derwin James so different. He's not just playing one position. He's playing football. He's doing whatever the defense needs him to do, right? And here's another thing. When Derwin James is at the line of scrimmage, offenses got to know where he is before every snap. Think about all the great players we talked about today. From Ronnie Lott to Brian Dawkins, what did they all have in common? Offensive coordinators had to account for them before the ball was snapped. That's exactly what teams have to do with Derwin James. You don't just forget where number 3 is lined up. Because if you do, he's liable to blow up your whole game plan. Now, does that mean he's finished writing his story? Absolutely not. I actually think there's another level for him to reach. And I think Chris O'Leary is the right coach to help get him there. Why? Because Chris O'Leary understands the position better than most coaches. Because that's where he built his reputation. He understands what elite safety play looks like. He understands communication and instincts. He understands disguise and leverage, right? Those are the little details that separate good defenses from championship defenses. So when people ask me if I'm worried about the Chargers defense taking a step back, my answer is hell no. Not because I know what's going to happen. None of us know that. My confidence comes from looking at the people involved. I look at Chris O'Leary's track record. I look at the continuity that's already there in place. I look at the talent on his defense. And I look at having one of the most complete safeties on the back end, right? That's why I'm optimistic. Now, we'll find out soon enough once the season starts. Football has a way of humbling us all. But based on everything I've seen, based on everything I've studied, and everything Chris O'Leary has already shown throughout his coaching career, I believe this defense is going to continue to play at a high level. And maybe, just maybe, the next time you're watching a football game, instead of following the quarterback, instead of watching the wide receiver, take a few plays and just watch the safety. Watch him communicate before the snap. Watch him point people into position. Watch how he discovers coverages. Watch how he closes throwing windows. Watch how he comes downhill to stop the run. Watch how he erases mistakes that other people make, right? Because if he's doing his job, you may not even notice him. And that's exactly what makes the great one so special. So as always, I appreciate every single one of you for taking the time out of your day to check me out, right? If you enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel with others. And also, don't forget about Friday. Chargers Talk 4630 hotline is going to be open. The number is going to be 848-208-6743. Leave a comment in the chat and let me know if you're willing to participate. If I do that for 30 minutes on Friday, are you people willing to call up and let's have a conversation? Or you could just talk about whatever you want to talk about, as long as respect is in order. You want to talk about what you want to see in camp, who you want to see make the roster, who you think is not going to make the roster. You want to talk about what your expectations of the season, how far do you think the Chargers are going to go? Do you think the Chargers are overhyped by the media? Let's talk about that on Friday. So let's do this. Until next time, I'm Stacy. This is Chargers Talk 4630. As always, both up.